Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? The schedule's released. We know the strength of schedule is tied with Atlanta for the easiest in the NFL, which is great. But I always say it's not just who you play, but when and where you play them. Yep. When you just look at, in total, the when and where, what's your reaction?
I don't think it worked out well for the Saints. I mean, there's nothing terribly, that they can't overcome, but 2 Monday night road games stinks, I think. That's one of the first things I look for. You never want a Monday night road game because then you're flying back home on a Tuesday morning and you got a short week the next week. You'd rather have those at home. They did get the Thursday night game at home against Denver, but it's at the end of 3 games in 11 days. The cold weather game's another thing you look for. They get Green Bay on December 23rd at night. They get New York in December. So a few of those things are negatives. And the other thing we've been talking about is the one thing I was really looking for in this schedule was I think this Saints team, more than many that I can remember, really needs to get off to a fast start. They got to get the fans engaged. They got to get the players bought in. And they have a lot of their toughest games in the first 6 games of the season. So getting off to a fast start is going to be a real tall order.
Saints are underdogs in 4 of their first 5. So a 1-4 start is a very realistic possibility. What do you think about the bye in Week 12?
I'm okay with that. I mean, I guess if you could pick your perfect bye, you would do it maybe exactly halfway through the season. But I don't ever want to be the team that has the Week 4 or 5 bye, and we know the Saints don't either. They even bypassed the chance to take the bye after that London trip a few years ago because they didn't want to have it that early in the season.
Yeah. Mike Triplett's with us on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Speaking of the primetime games, there are 3. You mentioned the 2 Monday Night Football and obviously Sean Payton coming back to the Dome. I'm sure you've given this some thought already, but what do you suspect that Thursday night, that primetime will be like with Sean Payton coming back?
Well, it'll be really interesting. We just talked about their tough schedule. What kind of state the team is in. I mean, even if they're 3-3, we were talking about this last night when we broke down the schedule on our show. Any combination of wins that gets you to 3-3 is going to be promising. It either means you beat the Chiefs or the Cowboys on the road, or you are undefeated in the division because you beat the Falcons and the Panthers and the Buccaneers, or anything that gets them to 3-3 means they're off to a good, promising start. People start to look ahead and say the schedule gets a lot easier down the stretch. That would be promising. But if they're not, if they're 2-4, if they're 1-5, God forbid, and the fans that were booing last year, the fans that weren't coming out, the fans that were selling their tickets to the opposing fans last year, that's going to be a lot of pressure on that game because I don't think Denver's a very good team, and it's just going to be all about what Sean Payton is, what Dennis Allen isn't. It's also an opportunity if they leave that game over 500. I think that'd be Dennis Allen getting over a huge hump, but it's going to be, that's the whole storyline. It's going to be about where Dennis Allen is at his career and where Sean Payton is in his career, and could be a lot of pressure on that.
What about what follows that too, Mike? Something that I always look for is when you have to do cross-country travel in consecutive weeks. So there's the Denver game, as you mentioned, but that's a Thursday, so you do get sort of the mini bye, but then you've got to go to the Chargers and then to the Panthers. So you're zigzagging across the country.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you've made these flights before. I mean, you're not an NFL player, but you've done it covering these teams. Can you speak to just the perception of cross-country travel?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, the one that stood out to me was at Kansas City on a Monday night. You get home on a Tuesday, you're hosting the Buccaneers in a big game 5 days later, and then you're hosting the Broncos 4 days later. Boom, boom, boom. You've played 3 games in 11 days. And so even though you get the mini bye, that those 2 trips come right after that. So the team's going to be put to the test during that, and that's always a winning help situation. Otherwise, that will be an exhausting stretch. It did not stand out to me on its own, though. I mean, Look, sometimes you have to play on the West Coast, and some teams. I think there was somebody put out the total miles traveled by a team, and the Saints were near the bottom of the list. There's certain teams that that the actual miles themselves are a lot tougher than what the Saints are dealing with. Actually, the last 2 years, I thought it was really lousy. They had to play at Arizona on a Thursday night, and they had to play at the Rams on a Thursday night. That really stood out to me as something I don't even think the NFL should do. I feel like all Thursday night travel should be like in your own time zone. But at the very least, that trip to LA is coming off the mini bye, like you said. So not the most egregious part of the schedule, I don't think.
The 3 games in 11 days is a great point too, Mike, because we were talking about it with the teams that are going to have to play on Christmas are going to face that because they're most definitely going to go Sunday, Saturday, Wednesday. So it'll be 3 games in 11 days, and essentially the Saints, as you mentioned rightly, are going to do the same thing in that stretch right there. I did want to point to the bottom of the schedule. The back-to-back games, the Monday against Green Bay, then the home game against the Raiders, which, of course, it'll be a frozen tundra game on Christmas Eve, and then you're home against the Raiders when Derek Carr faces his former team.
Yeah.
What's your perception of what LSU, excuse me. I'm looking at LSU. I'm looking at LSU baseball.
Well, right before that is Jane Daniels coming into town, right? Speaking of where the crowd's hearts will lie.
Yeah, speaking of LSU, of where the Saints will be at that point.
It's really interesting. They if they can get to if past that Chargers game in Week 8, and let's call them even 4-4. I think we're going to love the way the schedule looks for them. The travel isn't that bad outside of the Green Bay game. The opponents aren't that bad. The bye week in Week 12 will be a blessing at that point. So I'd say if you start 4-4, it sets up really nice for you to finish strong. That'll be the toughest part of it, though. Like I said, the thing about Monday night road games is not just being on the road at night in that atmosphere in Green Bay, in that weather in Green Bay, but then getting home from Green Bay, which is not easy to do. What time? 1 in the morning on a Tuesday, and then boom, it's week 17 and 18 coming up. So I don't think this team is going to be multiple games above 500 with a cushion. So they're going to be in it at that point.
Vegas has put out, looked at DraftKings, they put out their spreads for every game. Saints are favored in 7. Would you go over, under? Where do you think this team, just, again, I'm not holding you to this. A lot changes between now and kickoff, but what do you think?
I picked them to go 8-9. I felt that way before the schedule came out. If anything, the schedule made me feel a little worse about their record, but it didn't push me to 9-8. The thing about this Saints team is, I think if you objectively look at it, they can easily be better than the last 2 years under Dennis Allen. I mean, some of the core players have gotten older. Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, DeMario Davis. Maybe there's going to be some drop off there. We don't know how much they're going to get out of Marshawn Lattimore. Obviously, Ryan Ramczyk's hurt, but I think their offensive line with the first-round draft pick, I mean, it can't be worse than the run game we saw last year and the coaching staff they brought in. They added at least one key player to every level of the defense, and Chase Young, Willie Gay, Kool-Aid McKinstry. We think they underachieved each of the last 2 years. I don't see this. They won 7 games, then they won 9 games, and now they're a 5-win team. I don't see that like everyone else sees that. I think they're about the same team that they've been. But I think the schedule's a little tougher, and I just think their margin for error is paper thin. I don't think they have depth anywhere. I think injuries would kill this team. So it remains to see how it plays out. But I think we're looking at the same team we've seen really the last 3 years, including Sean Payton last year, where they're somewhere between 7 and 10, and it depends if you win the close games and get lucky with injuries.
Mike Triplett, neworleans.football. Always appreciate it, man. Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.